Welcome, Sara. Welcome, Shahroo. Very nice to see you.
Thank you.
This is full of promise as a topic. Compassionate connections, cultivating kindness in a digital age. When we hear that, Sara, we think, yes, I would like to do that. If we could do just one thing, what would it boil down to? If you could only say one thing on the topic today, what would it be?
One thing. First off, thank you for having me. It's exciting to be here. One thing for me would be meet more people in person, especially people you disagree with.
Oh, absolutely right. So applause, cordial applause here at the Sync Summit in Israel. And meet more people in person, especially that you disagree with. Shahroo, get our thoughts going.
I'd say create an intentional plan the way that you would any consumption, food, etc. Create an intentional, healthy plan for yourself in terms of your consumption of tech.
Right, now, I don't want to go digging too quickly, but there's a theory there, Shahroo, that actually we don't do that. That for many other things, diet-related, we might, but for digital, we don't, right?
Quite, yeah.
Okay.
Well, it's unprecedented. We didn't know the habits we had to manage, and now we have more insight, so yeah.
Right, so let's have a think about what's happened. And I am going to go, with your sort of pre-agreed permission, a little bit personal on this. Sara, let's scroll back a few years. You closed your Facebook account. You described your smartphone use. I wonder if anyone relates to this in the room today or tuning in. You described your smartphone use as a downward spiral. What happened?
Oh man, those two are distinct. Facebook happened first. First off, I want to take you back to when I first encountered Facebook, if I may, and that was in 2009. I was a little late to the game, and I actually went to one of those Waldorf schools that Silicon Valley execs like to send their kids to. So I grew up a little protected from tech. I admit that. And in 2009, I moved to Australia to do my undergrad studies, and I encountered Facebook for the first time. And I was part of a friends group that was already on Facebook. It was normalized. The like button had just come out, so it got a lot more addictive. People were checking, do my friends like my posts? And the first thing that struck me was, we're taking something beautiful and complex and deeply personal, like friendship, and we're turning it into a number. And a number is something we can compare, right? And friendship all of a sudden becomes this status symbol. And I thought, oh, this is gonna get us in trouble. So actually, the first thing that happened was I didn't go on Facebook. I was like, I'm not doing this. I'm worried about this. And so I held out until 2013. In 2013, I moved to Boston, and I didn't know a single soul. I moved there for my graduate studies, and I thought, let's be pragmatic. Let's go on Facebook. It's easier to make friends. That's what everyone does, right? That's what Facebook's for. And so I went on Facebook. And truthfully, at first, it was amazing. It was magical. It was like, all the people I'd ever met were there at my fingertips, and I'd lived on 3 different continents at that point, grew up in Germany, moved to Australia, then to the US, and all those people were just there. So I think for the first couple of weeks, I was just messaging everybody, and it was amazing. And the problems kind of snuck in gradually, and I didn't notice them at first at all. And the first thing I noticed was my time management kind of went out the window, and I was on Facebook until the early morning hours. And then I was sleep deprived, and then I was in a bad mood. And the things that then really started worrying me were behaviors I'm just not particularly proud of. I would go down rabbit holes into people's personal lives, and I was never much of a gossip person, and there I was all of a sudden stalking people, and I was like, what is happening to me? That's not me. And that's that downward spiral that I started noticing, and at a certain point it affected my mood, it affected my self-confidence. I didn't like who I'd become, and I decided this had to go, so I closed my account.
Okay, and then what, if any, results did you notice having made that decision?
A bunch of support, which was interesting. I actually wrote a bit of a manifesto, and I was like, I'm closing my account because it's turning me into a terrible person, and I described some of those things, and people were like, oh yeah, I relate. I actually ironically got the most likes, comments, shares that I'd ever gotten on Facebook for that post. And I was almost like, oh, maybe I should stay. This is nice. Like, I like that attention, right? But I still left, and people would come up to me and would talk to me about it. But the sense, this was 2014, was still like, yeah, you're right, but I need this to connect. So I wish I could do what you did. I wish I was that brave, whatever. But, you know, I'm going to stay on here.
Right, because what Shahroo, what Sara's describing is obviously, in her experience, a negative experience with technology. Now, that's something that you help other people with, and maybe something you have had personal experience with yourself.
I have. I don't think any of us are immune to this at this stage. And I teach impulse control. So I teach people to impose a conversation, in my case, a disruption between wanting to do something and actually following through with it, between trigger and response. But I can totally relate to Sara's experience. And I joined Instagram when my second book came out. So I was, when my first book came out. So I was very late, maybe like 2016, 2017. And it so quickly did I notice compulsive habits that really echoed relationships that I had with things like food, that it made me take the same approach. But the interesting, as I would if I was helping someone with any addiction to anything that they were consuming and were trying to moderate. But what I did first was I tried abstinence. And one of the things that I found really fascinating was that if I'm abstinent, say, from sugar for a month, and then I relapse, it's very unlikely I'm going to consume all the sugar that I would have consumed in that 1 month. When I didn't go on social media for a month, I'd covered all my bases within about an hour. I'd made it up. I was able to consume all of that information at once, and so it wasn't as compelling to stay off. And much like a lot of the things that we have to consume, it's so important that we have an intentional framework that we follow so that we understand ourselves and why we're engaging in these behaviors. Because as soon as I relapsed, if you will, I was really, I realized I had wildly underestimated the dopamine hit that it was giving me, how much insight I needed into other people, the perceived sense of control that it gave me as well.
Now, I just want to call this out because I've helped chair a session which I hope was enjoyed this afternoon, which was sort of, you know, Facebook as superhero, you know? Isn't it creatively empowering? And here we are saying, well, I shut it down and my life's never been better. How do we navigate a way through this? And we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we don't embrace this paradox. So I want to come on to many other things, but Shahroo, let's just hold on to that thought. To what extent is there a path through this where there are many benefits, joys, and uplifting aspects, and yet not the abstinence?
I think it's about being intentional and discerning and creating behaviors that give more than they take from you across your entire life. So when you think about the things that you would, for example, again, the foods that you would consume. There's junk food. There's the things that you use now and then under certain circumstances. I think we can be just as discerning and create just as bespoke plans that we internalize in terms of how we use tech, and to continue auditing and iterating, if you will, and updating them because things keep changing.
Yeah. And by the way, if you don't think I can consume 2 months worth of sugar, you haven't seen me at a conference over 2 days. Sara, as a filmmaker, tell us about your latest film, Your Attention Please, because this is fascinating.
Yeah, I'll keep that super short because I actually want to respond to that, where we just were. I started working on a documentary called Your Attention Please, and I started working in earnest on it about 1.5 years ago. And it really came out of my own experience of now dealing with my latest technology problem, which was my phone. So you'd think after the experience with Facebook, right, I knew what I was getting myself into and I was prepared. But I still found myself in 2019 kind of waking up to the fact one day that I couldn't actually read anymore. And I know that's something that I think people can resonate with.
And forgive me, do you mean pay attention?
I mean, you know, yes, pay attention. Yeah. I was trying to read a novel. It wasn't even particularly difficult. I studied philosophy, okay? I read Heidegger. Like, that stuff is hard. I'm a good reader, and all of a sudden I was reading a simple novel, and somehow it wasn't happening. Like, I couldn't get my way through the page without grabbing my phone. And that really worried me because I'm kind of proud of my focus. I'm proud of my reading ability. And that scared me enough to finally do something about it. My partner had been telling me for like a year that I had a problem with my phone. I wasn't listening to it. But the fact that I couldn't read anymore, that was scary. And so I set out to figure out what to do. And as I was trying out different hacks and like, creating plans and bringing habits back into my life that were actually fulfilling, which ultimately was probably the most helpful thing I did, I started talking to my friends about it, and everyone I spoke to was like, wait, how did you do that? What did you do? What's that app you use that helps you control screen time? And there was so much interest in it that I thought, oh, I think I should talk about this on a bigger platform. And so the idea for the film was born.
Right, so it is a very personal film in terms of your own journey, but you've intrigued us now about those techniques for doing some limiting. How did those play out? What did you learn?
Yeah, and I know we disagree on this one, so I'd love to get into it actually, or somewhat disagree on this one.
Right.
We chatted earlier. Switching off notifications was huge for me. But it's something I was very scared to do because I work as a producer in film, and you're kind of supposed to react when you get messages and emails. So I thought if I switch them off, I'm going to be unable to work. And I gradually kind of felt my way into that and switched a few off, then some more. And just finding that I was no longer interrupted all the time brought a lot of that focus back, actually.
Right, and so just pausing briefly for my benefit, because switching off notifications could bring a mental benefit in terms of your attention or your clarity of mind. Your concern was that you would miss out on opportunity.
Oh, yeah. And for the first 2 weeks, I think, I was constantly checking everything because I was terrified.
So hang on, you turned off notifications, and what was the net result?
At first, it was negative. I was on there more because I was checking. I was like, I cannot miss a single email, so I was on there all the time. And then what started happening about 2 weeks in, I stuck with it. And 2 weeks in, I would just get wrapped up in a task. I would be doing something, say I was writing something, and I would just get sucked in, right? And I'd forget to check anything because I was actually focused on my task.
So what's your thought on that, Shahroo? Because we've heard about the killer bees earlier. Be bored. Boredom is the crucible of curiosity. Turn those notifications off and let the seeds of creativity grow. Well, sounds very sensible to me.
I agree with Sara. I think initially what can happen is that there's a pushback and it's a withdrawal, essentially. You're experiencing a withdrawal and you're used to doing something constantly that either soothes or is you just associate with absolutely everything. I will say, though, I have really noticed, and I know this goes against the bulk of the evidence base on this, but things are moving very, very quickly, that when people feel incredibly dependent, taking notifications away actually increases their anxiety to some degree because they're looking more frequently and thinking, what could I be missing? But I think you're absolutely right in that if that period of time is spent, yes, building up areas that have more value to you and noticing how little you've actually lost.
Yes.
And missed out on. But also looking to build the habits and the strategies that may start to do the same job, whether it's that you were looking for connection or distraction or regulation. I think a lot of the time in habit change, what we do is we demonize the habits and we only look at the negatives and we hope that that will motivate us. But that doesn't really give you any insight into why you're engaging in that behavior.
So Shahroo was sort of asking for a bit of a free session here because we would like you to join the dots here between what Sara's saying about attention and your work treating addictive behaviors.
I'm saying take your notifications away, but if you're going to take them away, realize that you're going to be in withdrawal, and what you want to do preemptively is identify what you are getting from it, because those are legitimate needs that you have, and look at how you could have them met elsewhere, and look at that time as an intentional period whilst you're in withdrawal and you're adjusting to notice that whether it's the connection or etc., you need other ways of accessing it.
Well, let's just very briefly just pull on that word withdrawal, which is to think about weaning for caffeine, just for example, just imagining someone drank too much coffee. Can't imagine it. Weaning off. Better or worse than cold turkey?
Like titration. I think better. But
Okay.
I don't think that we should only think about weaning off the substance or the intervention or whatever it is that we are unhappy with.
Yes.
I think that first we should start with building the foundations that make us feel like we have more impulse control, etc. So what we often do is we demonize our habits, and on a Sunday night we say, that's it, Monday everything's going to change. You're far better off laying the foundations first to build your self-efficacy, your self-esteem, your self-awareness, your sense of calm, and your ability to make a mindful, intentional choice you'll be glad you made the next day. Then impose difficulty.
Right. So on this, there is a very specific method which you have pioneered, and I'd love to know what Sara thinks of this and what our audience think about this. It's the kindness method. Tell us a bit about it.
The kindness method is a step-by-step framework that anyone can follow to manage habits that their own habits, to self-manage their habits and to gain insight into why they haven't changed despite knowing how to. And ultimately, to gain the fundamental self-awareness, self-compassion, and self-belief required to change any habit on our own terms so that things don't get so bad, so it's sort of rock bottom, and we have to hand ourselves over and feel that all those things are depleted when we need them the most.
Yeah. But just thinking about that, when you say kindness, we're not, I sense you're talking not about how we act towards others.
Actually, yes, because often our definition for kindness when we're helping others to do something difficult is wildly different to our definition of kindness towards ourselves in the moment when we're challenged. So if you came to me and you said, I'm trying to be on my phone less and I'm finding it really difficult and I want to give up, the kind advice to you wouldn't be, okay, let yourself off the hook, you can't start until Monday anyway, you're probably too weak, you haven't got any willpower. The kind advice would be to give you the advice that reminds you of how capable you are, why you did it in the first place, and why you'll be glad you did it tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a really good distinction. Now, how about then putting this into practice? Where does it start in practical terms? Because perhaps this is helpful, Sara, perhaps it would have helped you. Where do you start with implementing the method?
An honest snapshot of where you are today.
Right.
Phones are one of those things that we often our baselines really scare us, and so we kind of go away from, when you, I mean, obviously this has been mentioned, but talking about screen time and things like that. Yep. Take the judgment out of it and just look at the numbers and look at the honest baseline of where you're at.
How do I get the numbers?
How many hours have I been spending? How long am I able to actually spend doing something, reading, without distracting myself and needing to check, where am I checking? Just get an honest snapshot of where you're at.
Okay.
And then what you want to do is list the benefits of this behavior. If I asked all of you what are the downsides, you'd be able to name pretty much the same things, and I could write the same 10 things. If I asked you what are the upsides, I would get some really personal stories. And so what you need to do is really look at, what am I afraid I'll experience if I don't engage in this behavior? Look at the upsides. And then you want to look at the upsides of you. So.
And within that, and sorry, I'm bringing you back in momentarily, but Shahroo, just on this method, I'm trying to understand within it, much might be said by people who are experiencing as, yes, this makes complete sense. How much within it is challenging? It says, well, maybe that doesn't at first glance make sense, but it works. I'm just trying to understand where there might be discomfort in embracing this, or whether all the doors are going to fly open.
I think that's a fantastic question. I wish more people would ask it. It's looking at it as behavioral change, just like anything else. So mastery, it will get easier if you do it in a row. So often when we're blaming ourselves for something, we feel shameful about it, we forget that. And so we just chase the outcome at any cost, and we don't actually learn how to do something. Yep. We don't know where the crumbs are and where we left them. Whereas if you intentionally say, I want to make not going on Instagram at 3 p.m. easier, and therefore I need to not do it 25 times in a row, and I have faith not in myself or in Instagram, but in the fact that the 25th time will be easier than the first.
Yes.
Mastery.
Sara, what are you making of this?
Oh yeah, that's a very open-ended question. I'm with you on the weaning off works better than cold turkey. I also know some people, for them it really works to do it cold turkey. I think for some people it works to kind of get a bit of a reality check. I needed one actually. I did a calculation about 2.5 years ago to remind myself why I was in all of this, to see over the course of my lifetime what my current screen time would amount to, and the math came out as 9 years. And I'd already done a lot of things at that point. I'd switched off my notifications, my phone was on black and white, I was experimenting with all kinds of things. And I was like, 9 years, the math must be wrong, this can't be true, right? But that number, it was right, and it actually did help me put some things into perspective. So I think in terms of an honest assessment of where you're at, that also, again, depends how much of a kick you need, I guess. I definitely needed that, and I needed to think okay, do I want to spend almost a decade of my life, of my waking life, on a screen? And how can I limit this? How can I really just get the benefits, because the benefits are there and the benefits are important, and get rid of everything else that is just a waste of time and energy and mental health and all of those things.
But wasn't there a moment, though, Sara, where you had you shared this previously? You described a pattern on Instagram where you'd install the app just to post a piece of work, you keep it for 24 or 48 hours to respond to comments, and then you delete the app again.
Yeah, 100%. To quote one of my favorite thinkers here, Sherry Turkle, she talks a lot about how the first step in all of this is to admit that we're vulnerable. We're vulnerable to what technology has to offer. And that, to me, is really where we need to start. So I recognize very quickly I'm vulnerable to Instagram. I'm very vulnerable to what Instagram has to offer. I can compare myself against other filmmakers. You know, that's kind of tempting. I can see what my friends are up to. So it's I can see if I got some DMs. It's a very tempting place. So I tried all sorts of things, and
why not?
Just getting rid of it on the phone was just the only thing that worked for a while.
And Shahroo, there's a practitioner. Are you listening to that and thinking, if that works, then fine? Or are you thinking to yourself, actually, Sara, there is another way. Have you thought of this?
I think she's absolutely right. I think that accepting one's powerlessness under some... There's a lot of power in acknowledging powerlessness, or acknowledging not complete powerlessness and that ultimately you don't have the choice, but that you are vulnerable.
Right.
That you have on that day perhaps less bandwidth. We had this discussion earlier about how often the way that one engages with technology reflects back what's going on in their life.
Yes.
The urgency with which you do it, etc. Where am I looking? Which sites am I going on more frequently? It can really, if you take the judgment out of it, it can give you an extraordinary insight into where things are at.
Now, does it depend, Shahroo, on the individual? And at the risk of asking an insensitive or ignorant question, we hear this phrase addictive personalities. You know, to what extent is there such a thing? Does it depend? Are some of us better able to cope with some of the full buffet than others?
There's a lot of evidence base that goes either way around addictive personality and whether we're predisposed towards things in terms of self-regulation.
Yeah.
Some of us are better at it than others. I would say, for the most part, when I speak to people and they think they have an addictive personality, it's because they've gone from one habit to another without really addressing how it was serving them. And so they just go and serve it. And so what you really want to do is look at a problematic habit as a solution that became a problem that you still need a solution for.
Yeah. Where did you get to, Sara, with the film, with Your Attention, Please? Was there, to what extent, was there an unresolved question? What was really, did you end up having a conclusion to it in a sense?
So we're still working on it. We're still in production. We're about 75% done, I think, at this point. Got another 25% to go. We started editing. I mean, this is a very complex problem. There's lots of questions. I think one that always comes up is how much should we put on the shoulders of an individual in this, right? We are living in a system where we're very overpowered. Is it fair to then go and say, you individual, go fix your relationship with technology? And it's one of those things that I like to say, it's not fair, but we still got to do it. Because who else is going to do it for us, right?
Yeah, it's a bold conclusion. It's a shame because we've got just a couple of minutes left, but I do want to ask you both, if there's somebody tuning into the Sync Summit or here in ITHRA who knows someone struggling with what I'm going to call a digital addiction, what advice would you have for them, Shahroo?
I would say write down the advice that you would give the person you love most if they came to you, and be very objective about it and say, these are my problems, this is how it isn't serving me. And really think about the conversation that you would have with them in the moment where they don't want to stick to their plan, and assess how much of that, how different that conversation is to the conversation you have with yourself when you want to let yourself off the hook. It's extraordinary. It's not just unkind. It tends not to be very smart either, the things we tell ourselves. So in the moment you want to quit on whatever plan you've created for yourself, simply ask yourself, can I have the same conversation that I'd have with someone I love? Can I behave in the way I would if someone I respect was watching? And will I be proud of my next choice tomorrow?
Really powerful. Sara, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say sit down and think about what the things are that make life exciting to you. And in some cases, maybe those are things you have never tried, but you know you want to try, especially if you're a young person, you may have not tried them yet. If you're an older person, you probably can think about a whole bunch of things you used to do that maybe you're not doing anymore because there's never time, right? There's never time. Of course, there isn't time if we're spending 3 hours on tech that we maybe don't need to spend. And then go out and aggressively pursue those things. Get those things back into your life. Yeah. And then see how you feel. And you might find that it's actually much easier now to forget that your phone is even there.
Yeah, what a powerful thought. And the chances are, dare I say, those ideas will occur to you not in the face of a flurry of digital information.
No.